Very good evening to all the students joining us tonight. For those that have been journeying with me for the past just about a week, and also for the new students that might be joining tonight. I'm Professor Jeanette Maritz, and I will be facilitating tonight's session. And we will be looking specifically at the role of theory in research, theoretical and conceptual frameworks. There were some questions around that I must please explain conceptual frameworks. And we have previously touched on theoretical and conceptual frameworks as we walked through our literature review and that information. So tonight we'll be continuing along the same vein. And as you can also see when we spoke about Bloom's taxonomy, is that we now are increasing our level of abstraction. So where we were very concrete in our conceptual phase, where we looked at, our background, our problem statement, our question, and our objectives. We are now moving to the more abstract parts of our proposal, and that's our theoretical and conceptual frameworks, and also the role of theory in your research. So that's what we'll be talking about tonight. As always, we will have a question and answer session at the end. So you are more than welcome to make notes as we carry along. And you can put them in the question and answer session, and we'll get around to those at the end of the presentation. So please enjoy, please be actively involved as you have been the past week or so, and it's been lovely to have interactive conversations with you. I'm going to, at the end of last night's session, there were questions around, could I provide additional information around some of the other applications where it can ease or assist in your literature reviews. So the first few slides, I'm just going to quickly make true on my promise that I said that I will give you some more applications and some of the applications that I've used or still use. So the first few slides are just a recap on the end of the session of last night. Right, so I'm going to stop sharing my camera for now, and we'll go over to the presentation, and I'll put my camera on again when we get to the question and answer session. Enjoy the ride. All right, so yesterday in the session, I spoke about a few applications that you could use that might assist you in your literature reviews. We spoke about lit maps, we spoke about Ryan, and then there was one application that I spoke about that I didn't give you an example of, and that is Elicit. You will see the name is top left-hand corner, and it's spelled E-L-I-C-I-T, Elicit, not illicit. This is also an application that has a free entry to it, but obviously also a paid version. And with all of these apps, the paid version allows you to do a bit more. But what I'm showing you tonight is on the free version. So what Elicit does is it helps you to find articles around your research interest. So I just started throughout the week. I've been telling you that the project, my niche area is looking at holistic support for postgraduate students, and I focus on wellness. So I've created a new topic for Elicit. So you simply go in to Elicit. You don't even need to create an account. It will automatically go there as you enter. So this was just off the bat, didn't log in or anything. And Elicit works in that way, in that it gives you the opportunity to ask questions. It can also do a few other things, but so I asked, what do we know about wellness support for postgraduate students? Now, say for instance, the question that I'm asking is more aligned to a scoping review. And hence the question, what do we know about wellness support for students? So what Elicit will do after I put in the question, it will turn on a summary of the top 4 papers that it found, and it will then give you a summary of the first 4 papers, or the top 4 papers that Elicit thought was accurate. And what is very nice, even on the free version, you can copy it. So Elicit, the first attempt was, I would say, about 80% accurate in what I was looking for. What I wasn't looking for specifically in the medical field, and then I realized I didn't tell it how recent I would have liked the articles. But what it would then do is Elicit would then automatically give you the articles that it had mentioned plus more. So Elicit works on tokens. I initially, when I started with Elicit, I got 500 free tokens. So if you want to do something more in depth, you pay with tokens. So it's not that there's a monthly subscription, you buy tokens. But on the paid version, there is a subscription amount, and then you can then use that subscription. So in the beginning, Elicit gives you about 6 to 8 related papers. But what is very nice with Elicit is, and this is the second screenshot that I'm going to show you, I realized the 2 things that was missing in the first attempt. And what Elicit then allows you to do is to either ask more questions and refine what you were asking, or there's other options to do other things. But I then asked only use papers from 2020 onward and add papers on mental health and postgraduate students. So I was now refining based on the first finding. So Elicit will then regenerate a new summary for you. I haven't shown you the new summary, but what I wanted to show you, what Elicit then does, it gives you the paper. It tells you who the author is. It tells you in which, who the author is, sometimes the journal. What you can immediately see, other than the date, is that you can see the number of citations. Now, you'll see the very first one already has 47 citations, so there's been a good uptake of this article already, but it's a 2020 article. So it's sometimes you find out, if it's a 2023 or 2024 article, the uptake might not, the citations is lower simply because it's newer. But that already can give you an indication, of the standing of the author and the uptake of that research. So initially, Elicit will give you an abstract summary, and it would give you that information. Now, on the side panel of Elicit, you can then add things that you would like Elicit to do for you. So I, for instance, asked for a summary of the paper, and I asked for the methodology. So if you did it by hand, you would probably have an Excel spreadsheet, and you would then import, have your own information, but Elicit basically does it for you. So I can already start asking or start with my tables and have my comparisons, and it's kind of all neatly done. Now, if you're on the free version, you can't download this table. You can see it and it looks amazing. You want to use it, but on the free version, you can see it, but you can't download it. So I guess you could use screenshots and then just retype it. But you might want to do the paid version for that. And then you can start with your literature review, comparing, contrasting, depending what is your focus of your review. Do you need to know what methodologies they were using? Do you just need summaries? And that what is also nice is you can start asking deeper questions. So that's more or less what Elicit does. You can, in the paid version, export it. You can apply filters. You can see at the top I added 2 columns already. There's more, I can add more. But in the free version, this is what you can get. But you can keep on asking questions and refine further if there's a need for that. So I find that Innocent is pretty neat, and it really can help you with your literature searches and your literature review to find articles. You would just need to evaluate the quality of the articles, but it already has the summaries for you. Then you will see the way that I get to know new platforms, new applications. I get it from posts on LinkedIn. And so what I'm sharing with you is literally screenshots that I take with my phone. And if I then have time, I go back to it and I try it out. So here's a few other suggestions. There's PaperPal Evaluator, and it evaluates the structure and formatting of your review paper. It assesses all your metadata, figures, references of your review papers. There's also Journal Finder, which would help you find the right journal based on your manuscript. That's for if you wanted to publish. So there's 2 more tools, and then another tool is R Discovery. Similar to Google Scholar, it will also send you notifications when the latest papers are published within your field of interest. You could audio stream the paper for you to listen to instead of reading it. So I think it's also very user-friendly in terms of those that might have visual impairments. It translates papers automatically to your native language. And that is a great feature because often, I think I've mentioned in the last 2 evenings, is that when you do a literature review, we would say we only use English speaking or articles written in English, which is a bit of a drawback because there might be very good articles written in other languages, but we don't access it because we can't read it all. And yeah, our discovery is very nice that it will actually translate the paper for you automatically into the language that you require. It's also very nice because it offers an automatic integration with Zotero or Mendeley, which is your reference application. So UNISA supports RefWorks. They no longer support Mendeley, but you can also carry on with Mendeley if you've been using it on the free version, so you wouldn't lose anything. So you can have free accounts on Zotero or Mendeley if you wanted to, but the UNISA supports RefWorks. Yes, so there are some additional applications that you can use and try around and play with. There's new additions and applications on a daily basis. And usually I can't keep up with them, and that's why I take screenshots until I can try them out. So there's a lot of scope to play around with these. Some of them are helpful for some aspects of your literature reviews, others for writing, others for different functions. So play around with these, and I hope those that I've mentioned for you are some that you can start using. So I just wanted to get back on you on the promise that I'll send. I will get you some more applications. but the ones that I have discussed should give you opportunity to play around with, and that will definitely assist in your literature review. So have some fun. Okay, and then we're going to get to why we are together tonight. And this slide says the role and utilization of theory in a PhD. Yes, some of the information is information that you will use in your PhD, but there is also information in terms of theory, the role of theory, conceptual frameworks and theoretical frameworks that will be useful just for you to know. So even if you're not doing a PhD, theoretical, the role of theory is important for you. The theoretical frameworks are important for you. You might not need to develop conceptual frameworks in a master's study, but it's good to know in any event. So for tonight, we're going to definitional issues related to theory, theory application within a doctoral thesis, a three-factor exploration, the role of theory in research, theory application in the thesis development. But we'll also then in the second part, so we're going to do two parts tonight, part 1 and 2, not spread over 2 days. So the first part, we're going to look at theory and theoretical frameworks, and in the second part, we're going to look at conceptual frameworks. Some of the information naturally runs over to the other aspect, but we're basically covering all of that tonight, and it's not over 2 days. But I think, yeah, I wanted to say it's less dense than the previous evenings, but it isn't. So just bear with the process. There's a lot of information. All right, so let's begin with trying to define what theory is. So we often use the term theory and theoretical concepts and theoretical frameworks, but maybe it's important just to get back to the basics and understand what theory is. Now, when we consult research books, their definitions is often also very highfalutin, which when you're reading it for the first time can be quite daunting. And one such an example is this one that we've got here. Remember, right in the beginning, I said that we are moving to the more abstract parts of our research proposal or our research journey. So a theory is an abstract generalization that offers a systematic explanation about how a phenomena is interrelated or how different phenomena are interrelated. So it's embedded in this is the view that a theory has two related but distinct purposes. The one aspect is that it has an explanatory purpose, and the other is that it has a purpose to predict, a prediction related purpose. And that's very important to keep in mind, because you will use it potentially, theory, for two purposes. And we'll talk about when we go to theoretical frameworks is usually the explanatory part of it, and it could also then in quantitative studies be have a predictory function, but it has a very distinct purpose in our research project. So, for example, a theory may provide explanations of how specific behaviors are related to, for instance, health outcomes. And there I'm thinking of the health belief model. So it will give you some explanation of why people behave the way they do related to health outcomes. In relation to prediction, a theory may predict that the use of one intervention is more efficacious than another. So a theory has a very definite purpose. It is more abstract, but it's also a systematic explanation about a phenomena. So if we look at some other definitions, a theory is an internally consistent group of related statements that presents a systematic view about a phenomena, and that it is useful for description, explanation, prediction, and again, prescription or control. So very much in line with the previous definition, there is it's abstract, it is systematic view of a phenomena, and then it would also look at the relational statements in this theory. So you would then, for your study, look at the theories that can potentially help you in your study to explain or predict, or we'll talk about the other functions in a minute. So when we look at how theory is developed, we will start from a concept development. Then we will move to a statement development, then to theory development, and then to theory testing. So that's a process that is discussed by Walker and Avant. I've updated these references to the latest edition in the reference list for you. So remember, I said please have the most updated references. And there is a newer edition of Walker and Avant that I've given you. So if you can think of these steps in theory development, you would need to identify concepts. You would probably need to define them, operationalize them into statements. Then the statements that you develop, you also can look at relationships, and then you start developing the theory. Now, in a PhD, we seldom get to the stage where we test the theory. We also very seldom develop theories. It is quite a process. It takes many years. And usually, if we do develop a theory, we will end at the theory development. However, we can also develop theoretical frameworks, for instance, and that we can test and evaluate. But theory development and theory testing is very ambitious tasks, even for a PhD. So, but there is that one aspect that you can develop theories. So remember in the beginning we said there's three ways of thinking about theory. So it is that which underpins your research design, and that is your paradigm, or sometimes people call it your meta-theoretical framework. So meta means above. So a meta-theoretical framework is the same as a paradigm or a system of beliefs. And our studies are all based on, or fit into a certain paradigm or a meta-theoretical framework, and we'll speak about paradigms. They're even more abstract than theories, but we'll speak about them. That which may inform our understanding of the phenomena under investigation, and then we use theory as a lens. You might recall in one of the previous sessions I mentioned that the theory can be like a pair of glasses. If they're pink tinted or blue tinted or just ordinary, but if I put a different lens on or a certain theory, with those pink or blue or white lenses, I am looking at my study. I use those lenses to frame my study, and within those lenses of that theory or that study, then I view my research. So that's what we mean by theory as a lens. And I can put on more than one lens. I can use more than one theory, and I can put on two lenses, for instance, because I might need two lenses. And then also that that which may emerge from our study of theory as new knowledge. So there are the three ways of thinking with or about theory then in our research design. But let's just go over to the very first point, and that's the meta theory or the paradigms and belief systems. Now, all our research falls within a specific paradigm depending on our research design. Now, research paradigms and theories are interconnected. So a paradigm is above a theory. It's more abstract, and we'll speak about paradigms in a minute, but it's more abstract than what a theory is. Meta, it's on a meta level. So on a meta level, we start thinking about our thinking. And for many students, the often quite problematic to try and understand. But bear with the process. All right. The paradigm then provides a broad philosophical and a methodological underpinning for the research. And that's very important to remember. So a paradigm is a philosophical underbuild. And it is also each paradigm then based on this philosophical underpinning has certain assumptions which would then have an effect in our research. So while theories provide a more specific framework for understanding and explaining a phenomena, that is still set within a certain paradigm. So please remember, a paradigm is called different things. You might find it named differently in different textbooks, but that is your philosophical underbuild of your study. So some might call it a paradigm, others call it a meta-theoretical perspective. So that is the philosophical paradigm that's going to guide our study and has certain assumptions that's going to influence our study and the choices we make. So when we speak about paradigms, this also becomes more abstract, and the students really battle with a whole new vocabulary when we speak about paradigms and the philosophical underpinning. And why are we talking about a philosophical underpinning? In one of the previous sessions, I asked, what does a PhD stand for? And I didn't have any brave soldiers that made a comment, but maybe you would like to do that exercise and go and look what does a PhD stand for. So the P is philosophy in then what direction your research goes. So by the mere fact that you are studying or reading for a PhD means that it is a degree, a philosophical degree in many instances then. So it goes without saying that there needs to be some philosophical underpinning in your PhD. But even that's just by the way, all studies have a philosophical underpinning by virtue of the designs that you choose. So the new words that we need to learn when we speak about paradigms is ontology, epistemology, and methodology. There's also two others, and that's the axiology yeah, but I think for now, if we can stick to that, you understand what's the ontology, epistemology, and the methodology, you'd be okay. So what do we mean by ontology? Ontology means it's the philosophical assumptions about what constitutes social reality. So in the different paradigms, each paradigm would have a different belief about what constitutes reality. When we speak about the epistemology, is what do we accept as valid evidence of that reality? when we speak about methodology, it means the means by which we investigate that context. So methodology is probably the one that you might understand the best or the easiest for now, because that aligns with your design and methods. It's the means by which you're going to investigate the context in which your phenomena takes place. And then obviously methods would mean by which we gather evidence or by which we gather data. So the first belief in terms of ontology, let's just maybe look at it in a bit more detail. So ontology, you would ask, what do we believe exists? Or what do we believe reality is? So, for instance, if I say I believe that reality can be tested, you know, one of the philosophical underpinnings. I can measure and I can test and I can plot the reality that I'm investigating. I might be likely be working in the positivist paradigm, because they believe that reality can be measured, for instance. Which the constructivists, under which qualitative research falls, believes that reality is not static, for instance. So in the ontology, we also ask about the fundamental beliefs that individuals hold about the nature of the social world and its relationship to individual social actors. Now, those are very dense words. But if you can remember that it speaks to, the ontology speaks to the reality and what we believe exists. Social reality exists independent of the observer, and social reality is constructed by people in a particular social, cultural, or historical context. Now, if you believe these statements about reality, then obviously these aspects is going to play a key role, and how you then look at the phenomena that you are studying through an ontological lens. The same would go for the epistemology. So in epistemology, it is about truth. What do we believe about knowledge? What knowledge? How do we view knowledge? And what constitutes reliable and valid knowledge? So some of the paradigms, there's more paradigms, but usually these are the three main ones: objectivism, subjectivism, and constructionism. Now, each of these will has a different belief around what is reliable and valid knowledge. So in objectivism or positivism, they believe that meaningful reality exists out there, and human beings need to discover it. And objectivists assert that meaning is already inherent within that object being examined, and the properties of that object can be measured and quantified. So very much aligning, we either call it positivism or objectivism. And then due to the fact that the belief is that it can be measured and quantified, quantitative studies fall largely within the positive or objectivist paradigm. Subjectivism, this epistemology purports that meaning emerges not from the interplay between the subject and object, but is imposed on the object by the subject. I must say I don't get to do that much with subjectivism. We find more in qualitative studies that we work with interpretivism and constructionism, where we believe that reality is socially constructed by the people as they engage in the world that they interpret. So I maybe just a few other points, and then I'll just try and make it simple. So when we look at epistemology, it's about what constitutes reliable and valid knowledge. the causal relationship between observable phenomena, the interpretations of meaning, then methodology, how do we produce reliable and valid knowledge? What's the strategies of inquiry are appropriate to your ontology and your epistemology, and we'll speak briefly on that. So we can then, based on our paradigms, either have a descriptive or confirmatory study, or an explanatory or exploratory study. Now, these things will also make more sense when we add our designs and approaches to these paradigms. Because you can see that when you have an explanatory work, if you are working in a quantitative with a quantitative design, your aim is usually to explain, where qualitative studies usually explores and is more descriptive. So our paradigms then also influences our designs and vice versa. So all of your designs and approaches lies within a specific paradigm, and those paradigmatic assumptions influence your research choices. So how can we collect data to test our theories, to describe a social phenomena? Immediately, if we talk about testing and explaining, it is usually within the positive paradigm, quantitative studies. If we are talking how can we collect to explore and describe a phenomena, that would be a more qualitative study. And we'll talk about mixed methods just briefly. And then obviously, what data collection approaches do we use? So for quantitative studies, we might use surveys because we're going to count. Or qualitative studies, we might use interviews because we're going to analyze words. So each of those choices that we make is based around our beliefs and our assumptions within the paradigm that our design falls in. So the theory application in the models of research. Now, this again, different textbooks calls the different things. Some people call it models of research, others call it your research design, others call it your research approaches, and then the student will ask me, so what's the difference between a design and an approach, and why does one book say qualitative design and another book says qualitative approach? Now, what I tell my students is pick one seminal author, and if they talk about design, then just consistently speak about a design in your study. Don't in one place call it qualitative design and another you say it's a qualitative approach. So choose one and stick to it if you're following a specific key author. So when we talk about qualitative studies, there we aim to understand social phenomena through the exploration and interpretation of the meanings people attach to and make sense of the experience. So qualitative studies is usually, associated with the interpretive paradigm or sometimes the constructivist paradigm. And the key principle here is that is subjectivity and interpretation. And the theory development is during or after the study. So qualitative studies does not aim to test theories because our methodology and our approach is completely different, and we do not aim to generalize findings. Therefore, our approach is more inductive, and we then aim to generate theory. So at the end of a qualitative study, we can generate theory, where in quantitative studies, it is the opposite. So in quantitative studies, we work more deductively. So we work from the post-positivist paradigm. This inquiry is based on testing. a theory composed of variables and numerically measuring and analyzing this variables via statistical procedures. So important to remember, qualitative studies, we collect data in the form of words, and in quantitative studies, it's numbers. Quantitative studies, as I've said, more in the post and positivist paradigms, and the key principles here is objectivity. Now, if you listen to what I said previously, remember we said that a positivist paradigm, their belief is that that reality can be tested. Therefore, it's objective. Where in qualitative studies, they don't hold that belief. They believe that reality is in constant flux, and therefore their key principle is subjectivity. And then within the quantitative studies or designs, the theory development is before the study takes place. So there's more a line of theory verification than theory generation. So both qualitative and quantitative designs, it works with theory in different ways. Qualitative theory generating and quantitative theory verification. So quantitative, the theory goes before, and qualitative, the theory is developed after. So I said I'll quickly mention mixed methods. Why I say quickly isn't that I want to brush it off. And I know that you have 1,000,001 questions about mixed method study. I'm just saying that I'm not going to go into detail because there are upcoming courses that specifically deals with different research designs and methods, and the mixed methods study is explained in a lot of detail there. But suffice to say that a mixed method study is exactly that. It has a qualitative component and a quantitative component in a single study. Now, there are different types of mixed methods. It can be concurrent, where qualitative and quantitative strategies are employed in parallel, or sequential, where the one qualitative informs the quantitative, or vice versa. But what is very important with mixed method studies is that what is the hallmark of a mixed method study is that at some point there is integration of these two strategies. And that's the hallmark of a mixed method study. Now, automatically, you're going to ask me now, in which paradigm does a mixed method study fall? If we said previously that quantitative strategies usually fall in the positivist paradigm, and qualitative studies more in the interpretivist paradigm. So what then is a mixed method? Am I working in two paradigms? And the answer related to that goes back to what is the objective of a mixed method study. We do a mixed method study for a certain reason, is that we believe that we need both strategies to sufficiently ask a research question. And then based on that integration of the information, then come to an answer. But a mixed method study falls within the pragmatic paradigm, pragmatism. And pragmatism believes that you do it for practical reasons. So mixed method study falls within the pragmatic paradigm. But please just remember that you would still have a qualitative aspect, and you will need to have a detailed qualitative design or approach with the specific methods related to that design, with the specific measures of trustworthiness, with a specific data collection, data analysis method, plus then the quantitative in the same manner. So it might be you can really think about it as two studies that's integrated at some time, but it's your choice is for pragmatic reasons. And then the last word on that one that I'm going to talk about that tonight is my belief that you don't attempt a mixed method study in a master's for a master's dissertation, simply because it's actually two full-fledged studies, and you don't have that time in a master's dissertation to do that much work. So I would never recommend that a master's student do a mixed method study. A lot of people are doing mixed method because they think more is best. And that's not true. You can do a purely quantitative or purely qualitative study in a thesis, and it's sufficient. So it doesn't mean that mixed method studies are better. You choose a mixed method study because you have a certain pragmatic assumption that underlies it, and that makes the choice then for a mixed method study more viable. But please don't think the more people you interview, the more the better the study. It's not the case. The more doesn't make a study better. It is the more depth, the more detail, the more abstraction, the more of that. It makes it a better study, not the more in terms of more surveys, more context, more people, more doesn't necessarily make that a better study. It's chosen for a specific reason. All right, so that's on the more abstract level, or on the meta theoretical level. We are dealing with paradigms. Each paradigm has a certain set of assumptions or beliefs, and those assumptions, we've spoken about some of it, subjectivism in the interpretivist paradigm, objectivism, for instance. Those are just a few, but each paradigm has its beliefs in terms of what is reality, what is knowledge, how it's constructed, and what design we would then follow within those paradigms and those assumptions. So I'm going to step off a very, very let's put it a very abstract place in our research, and very often it takes a while to just wrap your head around it and what it actually means. I think I only grasped it after my PhD. So don't worry if it's the first time you hear about it and you don't get it. At least just acquaint yourself with the words, the jargon of paradigms, and the more you read, the more you should absorb and be able to play within that paradigms and their belief systems. Also remember, you have a personal belief system, and even that personal belief system can also have an impact in terms of the paradigms you work in. So your personal paradigm and your personal belief system could also have an impact on that. But we usually speak about that a bit more when we actually speak about the designs and approaches in more depth. So yeah, I know there's very often quite a lot of questions around mixed methods, but it's upcoming. Then we spoke about the use of theory as a lens, and I just briefly mentioned what we mean by it when we call it a lens. So it's an existing theory which seeks to explain how aspects of social reality works. Also, sometimes are called models. So, for example, models of learning would be behaviorist Skinner's approach, constructivist Piaget, deep learning Anderson, Some models, for instance, of professional development, expertise development, situated learning, LaVey's community of practice, novice to expert, Benner. So in each discipline, there are certain theories or models that are often innate in that discipline. But it is always possible to borrow theories and models from other disciplines. So you need to find out which is the most common models in your disciplines, but then please, especially on a PhD level, go and look at other theories and other models that you can maybe combine or use in your study. So when I then put on the for instance, the novice to expert lens, I put on Benner's glasses, then I'll be looking at my my study through Benner's novice to expert model and the assumptions and the concepts, and that would then frame my research. So that's what we then mean by theory as a lens. It's something that is now going to by which you're going to look at your research through. So theory as new knowledge, that's when we adapt or revise or confirm an existing theory. So say, for instance, I use the health belief model as a lens for my study, and I analyze my data, and I find that there is adaptation needed to that model. Maybe something hasn't been mentioned previously, or there's a concept that comes out that can be added. So we can maybe adapt that theory or model, or we can revise it, or we can confirm the existing theory. Or in a quantitative study, we can generate new theory generation. And this relates to a conceptual framework. And I'll give you examples of conceptual frameworks in a minute. So a conceptual framework is a written or visual representation that explains either graphically or in a narrative form the main things to be studied, the key factors, concepts, variables, and the presumed relationships among them. So the difference between a theoretical framework and a conceptual framework is, and I think I mentioned it in the previous meetings that we've had, that a conceptual framework is usually forward-looking, where theoretical framework looks back. And that's maybe easier to remember than all these highfalutin words. So with a conceptual framework, we aim to develop something that maybe doesn't exist anymore, based on evidence or on literature, for instance. Where with a theoretical framework, we are looking at a specific theory as a lens, and we're then looking at either adapting or revising. So theory is more backward looking. It already exists. We use it as a lens, and we either adapt, revise, or confirm that theory. But conceptual frameworks are forward-looking. We develop them at certain stages, or we can develop them at certain stages of our research based on evidence that we have. So your evidence can either be at the end of your literature review. You can develop a conceptual framework because you base it on evidence, or you can develop a conceptual framework at the end of your data analysis. And then develop a conceptual framework based on the evidence of your data. So you can see it's something that is forward-looking. We still develop it, where a theory is backward-looking. It already exists. So just a few words on conceptual frameworks. In quantitative research, it's typically developed after the literature review that I just mentioned. The role is that it provides structure and contents for the whole study based on the literature and could be on personal experience. And it is revisited at the conclusion of the study. Now, in a qualitative study, you could also have an initial framework after a literature review, but then it's developed further based on participants' views or your qualitative data, and attributions are collated and then analyzed. So a conceptual framework and a qualitative study, well, in both, can be after your literature review, and I'll give you an example now. But in a quantitative study, it is revisited. Then it frames the study initially, and a qualitative study, it then develops and generates new theory at the end. So I'm just going to, there's now a lot of talking on my side, so I just want to take your mind away a bit and just give you a practical example. It's also a practical example, I think, that I mentioned in the past 2 evenings. And it's an example of a conceptual framework that I developed based on myself and a few colleagues based on a scoping review. So I'm just going to show you the abstract, and I'll read it to you because it's a bit small, but I wanted to put the whole abstract in for you. We started off by saying that this study delves into the complexities of psychoeducational well-being support for postgraduate students against the backdrop of escalating mental health challenges affecting students' well-being, retention, and academic productivity. So it simply gives you some background. Now, going back to what we spoke about last night, we then say we conducted a scoping review informed by Peters's framework and analyzing literature from 2020 to 2023. And the aim was to map out existing psychoeducational support practices in postgraduate supervision to improve well-being. Then we give the key findings. So we analyzed the articles that we decided on eventually, and we had our findings at the end of the scoping review. But what we then did is that we developed a conceptual framework. So based on the findings of the scoping review, we actually did 2 things. In one aspect, we use Bron von Breller's ecological theory as a lens, but then we used our findings and put it within Bron von Breller's ecological theory to demonstrate and illustrate the complex interaction between the systemic layers affecting psychoeducational well-being. So in this study, we used theory in different ways. We used theory in terms of literature, that's theory. We also used a theory, Bron von Breller's theory, as a lens, and then we developed our own conceptual framework. So remember when we spoke about conceptual frameworks, we said there can be a visual representation. Now, our visual representation in the end looked like this with the help of a graphic designer, and you can clearly see the Bron von Breller's theory. He speaks about micro, meso, exo, macro chronosystems. And what we then did, we took our findings and put them as they applied in the different systems, and thus indicating that, there's a flow between the systems and the one affects the others until we get to well-being. So I hope that gives you a visual idea of how in one study one can use theory then in 3 different ways. You could have skipped the branch umbrella and just developed a innate conceptual framework without using a theoretical theory or a model. And I'll give you an example of that at the end of the slides. But I hope this can just give you an example and visually illustrate to you what we've talked about now a lot about words and theory, but that this makes it real to you and how it fits in with a literature review, which in this case was a scoping review. All right. So hopefully that just takes your mind off listening to a lot of stuff. All right, I'm going to just give you a short while to think about your own studies. So if you can just try and absorb what you've heard and saw now, and think about your own study and see if you can identify the opportunities for theory integration or theory application. So have you identified a theory in terms of the likely meta-theoretical paradigm, or your paradigm or theory as a lens, or theory as new knowledge? So just absorb what we've spoken about and now go back to your own study. And based on what you heard, maybe jot down a few ideas if you haven't done it already. If you have done it already in your study, then jot it down and you can revisit it and see, if it makes sense to you now, if there's the integration. So look at points where in your own study you were able to identify opportunities for theory integration and application. And then definitely if you could identify, your theoretical, your paradigm, your theoretical lens, or your theoretical, or the theory that you would use. So I'm just going to give you a minute or two just to take a breath and think about your own study and how you either could think about it going forward or how you've already used it if you are a bit further along in your study. And I'm just going to have a sip of something in the meantime, so I'm not gone. All right, so I hope that that's brought some consolidation in terms of the theory and the application to your own study. So maybe just an example then, theory application opportunities. There's different spaces where there's opportunity for theory application, and it can be used at any stage of your research proposal or your research project. So you can use theory at the beginning or planning session where you plan, for instance, through which lens you're going to use it. You can use it during the research, as we've done with our data, while you're collecting information, while you're evaluating or reflecting. Basically, our theory is alive throughout our research process. It's alive when we do our literature study. It's alive when we choose a lens. And I guess I can preempt another question, is that should all studies have a theoretical lens? Should all studies depart from a theoretical, from a theory or a model? And my answer to that is that the answer is no, it doesn't have to. If you're a very puristic qualitative researcher, and one of the assumptions is that reality is created, you might not depart from a theoretical framework because you are working inductively. And therefore it's theory generating. So it might be that I have quantitative studies qualitative students that are working in the qualitative designs or with qualitative designs that don't have a theoretical framework. And that's okay on a master's level. Usually on a PhD level, it is expected. The advantages of having a theory, even in a master's study, is that the theory can guide your whole study. Your theory can guide your data collection. It can be the lens that you use to analyze your data. So it can give your study more structure than working purely inductively and then developing the theory afterwards. And then it's based on a completely inductive approach. If you are using a theoretical theory or a model to frame your study, you are obviously working more deductively because you already have priori concepts, constructs, and lenses through which you're going to look at your study. So the one working purely inductively, you might not use one, but if you do use one, then you are working more deductively. To confuse the matter a bit more, you can also then work in a qualitative study both deductively and inductively. So you might start off deductively with your theory and then work inductively, where you bracket your preconceived ideas and go into the field with no priori knowledge, and you bracket it and you collect your data and then you bring the theory back. So there are different options and different roles that the theory can play. But if you use theory as a lens, it frames your study both in how you collect data, how you analyze data, and how you write up your findings. So I hope that's as clear as mud to you now. This slide really is just for those of you that, we put it in every so often so that you can maybe just get an idea of where we're at in the research process. So last week we talked about your topic development and the overview of your topic. We looked at your literature review, and that was more in your conceptualization phase. And where we are tonight, we're looking at the requirements of your data, your design that's framed by a theory. And then we'll be in the nights and the evenings coming along, there'll be a look at the specific designs, which is more your empirical phase when you start collecting your data, analyzing your data, writing up, and communicating your research. So we basically now up to last week looked at the conceptualization phase, and we are now in the theoretical phase of the research process. But still, some of you might still be in the conceptualization phase if you still need to think about theories. But that's more or less where we are. As I said, I promise that I'll give you some up-to-date resources where you can find information regarding the paradigms, how to work with theories. So these are all the latest versions of the books mentioned previously in this slide. So you're welcome to use those. They are all excellent to discuss paradigms, theories, the use of those in your research. And then Walker and Avant is, although it is a book based on in nursing, it's probably one of the very, very few books that actually explains step by step how to develop and construct a theory in great detail. So if you are interested in theory development, or model development. With my students, I'd rather call it framework development, because we don't test theories. But we still use Walker and Avant to guide us in our framework development and to evaluate our frameworks. So those are useful resources, especially of those of you working on a PhD level. All right, and then we are now halfway, and our time is just about halfway, and we're just about halfway through the slides. So some of the work that we're going to now do is to some extent a repetition, but with added information. So let's maybe just look at what we wrote about theoretical versus conceptual frameworks. It's just another way to say that theoretical frameworks is based on existing theory, and a conceptual framework is something you can develop based on this theory. So a theoretical and conceptual framework explains the research path and grounds it in the theoretical constructs. And the overall aim of the two is to make research findings more meaningful and acceptable. And also added to the research field in the case of theory development, for more generalization, but not in qualitative paradigms. So a theoretical framework is your blueprint that will guide your study. It is borrowed. So another way of looking at it is that you can see it as a foundation of your house. You borrow a foundation and then you build on that foundation, and that building is your own work. But the theory provides the foundation for you. So it also, some people say it's a map or a travel plan, but it can also be the map or the plan of the house that you're building in your research. Just again, some other definitions on theoretical frameworks. All aspects of the research should connect to the theoretical framework, and I think we've said that your theoretical framework will guide your design. Potentially, it can guide your data collection and definitely your analysis, and it underpins the base of the phenomena that you're going to research. So theory has principles, constructs, concepts, and tenets of a theory. So just examples of some theory. The social cognitive theory, for instance, is Albert Bandura's work. And this theory, for instance, emphasizes the idea of an interactive triad that involves the individual, the behavior, and the environment. So if you just use those tenets of Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory, and you look at your research using the individual factors, behavioral factors, environmental factors, when you're now going to analyze your data, you are going to analyze it according to individual behavioral and environmental factors, and you will then report your findings within individual behavioral and environmental factors. So maybe just look at an example again of an application. So we hypothesize that individuals with high self-efficacy and positive attitudes towards social media are more likely to engage in frequent social media use. So that's the individual behavior interaction. We also propose that the frequent social media use in an environment where high usage is the norm may contribute to changes in mental health status. That's the behavior environmental interaction. Finally, we suggest that individuals in a social environment that encourages frequent social media use may develop positive attitudes towards such a use, influencing their behavior. So you can clearly then see how the theory then becomes alive in your research process. So the importance of a theoretical framework, as we said, it provides a structure to guide the researcher to define their philosophy, epistemology, ontology, methodology, and the analyticality of the project. It normally serves as the focus for the study and is linked to the research problem or phenomena being investigated. So you need to bring your research problem into focus when you make your choices regarding a theoretical framework. So we've just said it, guys. Then your choice of a research design that provides a common worldview or a lens to support your thinking as it relates to the problem being studied, and it guides and must resonate with every aspect of your research. And what they mean by that, and it's something that I often get with students, is that the student would write, sometimes even a chapter on it, or, 10 or 15 pages on their theoretical framework. And then it's the last you ever see of it in their dissertation or thesis. So it died in chapter 1 or 2. It never became alive. It was never operationalized during any part of the study going forward. And it might seem that, goodness gracious, how is that possible? But I promise you, I've examined many studies where that theoretical framework just dies in the beginning of the study and is never taken through to the data collection, the data analysis, or the write-up of their findings, or even in the discussion. It's just, it died in front. So very important that it must resonate and be alive in every aspect of your research, from your problem statement, your literature review, your theory, your methodology, your presentation, your discussion of your findings or your results. So the theory it's alive throughout your thesis. Please remember that. It can also guide the type of data you need to collect. It can deepen the essence of the study. And it convinces readers that the study isn't based on personal instinct, but rather on established theory gathered via credible literary sources. But I don't think we haven't mentioned it yet. So now we come to how do we construct a theoretical framework. So remember we said when we spoke about theoretical frameworks that it consists of constructs, relationships, and then the interrelationships between constructs and relationships, and based on that we develop a theory. And that's exactly what this slide then says. You consider how the variables are related to the theory, and that will then frame your study. But when you develop a conceptual framework, it's a structure which you believe could best explain the natural progression of this phenomena as you are studying it. So it offers a logical structure of connected concepts, and it also provides a picture or visual display of how ideas in a study relate to each other. And it also then assists the researcher to specify and define the concepts within the problem of the study. I don't think there's really any new information. We've spoken about the development, the importance of conceptual frameworks. It brings together related concepts and to explain and predict a given event, and it accentuates the reason why a research topic is worth studying, and it can also then be the culmination eventually of your research. So many of my studies, the PhD students, it would be the unique contribution and the title would then read a conceptual framework for, and then you discuss the phenomena. So it's something that's developed at the end of your data. Well, then two places, as we said, after your literature review or after you've conducted your review. And then very importantly, mostly diagrams are created to clearly define the constructs, and I'm going to show you pictures of how it was done. So also Fisher adds that a good conceptual framework must also be expressed in writing for it to be understood clearly. So at the end of your conceptual framework, you will discuss each element of that framework and what it constitutes and how the elements fit together, and to explain. So it's not just a visual diagram, you actually need to write the narrative around that. Okay, I think we can now leave this topic. What's the differences? We've discussed that in length. So if you are test driving a framework development, then consider this question. What are the factors that impact the uptake, for instance, of substance misuse and relapse prevention counseling services? So my hunch could be that an individual's belief about health have a role to play. Therefore, I choose the health belief model. The motivation has a role. So part of the health belief model is that motivation has a role to play. But I'm also looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah, I'm using two because it focuses on stigma and social pressure that also have a role to play. So I'm using constructs and assumptions from two models or theories to delineate more than one aspect that could provide me a lens to look at the phenomena. So yeah, some visual in terms of an early mapping out from the health belief model constructs and how you might think that they fit into each other. And then the questions that emerge from this is, for instance, perceived severity of substance misuse, problems among peers, and perceived personal risk can be inferred. What can be inferred from being a teenager? Perceived susceptibility, what risks do participants see for themselves with respect to substance abuse, and perceived benefits of taking up support from designated support and treatment services. What's the impact? What impact do participants perceive from the existing treatments? So you can then see that even your questions is guided by your theoretical theories or your models. And then going to the other theory, perceived barriers related to service uptake, we're looking at the health belief model. Yeah, what are the barriers and how can these be minimized to promote service uptake? We also look at the modifying variables, and then we look at cues to action. So I'm just going to go through this. So yeah, I don't think we need to go into Maslow to understand the previous work. I actually want to bring you to how to develop a conceptual framework in a qualitative study. So what I do with my students is that we use Dickhoff, James, and Wiedenbach. Yesterday we spoke about seminal sources. Now Dickhoff, James, and Wiedenbach presented at a conference in 1968. And they plotted out how they thought conceptual frameworks could be guided. And what they proposed was organizing principles for theory development. So Dickoff, Jones, and Wiedenbach isn't a theory. It works as a thinking stick. It gives you certain prompts on which you can then base and start developing your conceptual framework. So please remember that Dickoff, James, and Wiedenbach is a conceptual guide. It's not a definite procedure. It can be modified to fit your study, and items can be included in each area as your study emerges, thus depending on the type and scope of the phenomenon that's being studied. So the guiding principles here, they have 6 areas in terms, and they call it activities. So say for instance, you have your data after you have collected data, whichever way, and you want to develop. I'm going to just use this example as we're going on. In this case, I developed a conceptual framework for coaches, business coaches, and to develop a program to train them. So I use Dickoff, James, and Wiedenbach as a thinking tool, so, and using their 6 activity steps. So it simply gave me a tool to think about the development of my framework. So they have agents, a recipient, a context, the outcome, a procedure, and dynamics. So let me show you how this developed. So the agent, you ask yourself who or what performs the activity. It could be informed by your worldview or theories from you or other disciplines. But in this study, the agent for me was the coach educator. And I use the whole person theory, which says that a person holistically, when we look holistically at a person, they have a body, a mind, and a spirit. So there's already my theoretical framework coming into how I then see the agent, which in this case was the coach educator. So remember, previously I said to you that we can have a visual, but that visual needs a narrative. So here is the narrative and the description around the agent. So the circle, I'm actually giving the detail. So the colors have meaning, the circles have meaning. So in this case, the circle is a universal symbol depicting the wholeness of the coach. The yellow, orange color of the circle depicts intellect, enthusiasm, energy. The inward upward facing triangle symbolizes the threefold internal environment of the coach educator, namely body, mind, and spirit. And the body includes the physical structures and biological processes, where the mind, the psyche, refers to intellectual, emotional, and volition processes of the coach. So there's the narrative around the agent. The same goes with the recipient. So who's on the receiving end? On the receiving end, you would have your learner coach. Okay, and these were business coaches, all right. And then you would have your description again. The context is the third of the activities. In what context is the activity performed, or the dimensions of the context? It can be the setting, the location, the physical, psychological structures, time, space, atmospheres. So there's in what context does it take place? So when I had to describe the context, sorry, there's one missing when on the outcome now, but the context then was the coaching environment. Then we looked at what is the outcome, what's the visualized end product, and that was a program for team coaches to facilitate the mental health of managers. And then the procedure, I described what the procedure is that this would entail. And I described what the dynamics is, what's the energy source that would keep the dynamics between the agent and the recipient going. And each of these is then narratively described. And at the end, the conceptual framework looked like this. So there's both my theoretical, my theory in this, the whole person approach that's alive in the agent and the recipient. I spoke about the context in which this takes place, the underpinning, what keeps this in the dynamic. There's the process, and then the different development of the process to reach that outcome. So in this case, I then used Dickhoff, James, and Wiedenbach as a thinking tool. So many of my students use this thinking tool, and all of their frameworks looks differently. No one looks the same because their theoretical stance is different, their contexts are different, their agents, recipients are different. So it simply gives you a guiding or a thinking tool to help you in your conceptual framework development. So this framework was developed at the end of a qualitative study. So using the evidence and the findings, this was then by using these thinking strategies. This was then developed at the end, and this was the unique contribution of the thesis then. So I hope you've got an idea now in terms of the visual representations, what it might look like if you develop a conceptual framework at the end of your literature review, and what a conceptual framework might look like at the end of your once you've analyzed your data, and this is then a new contribution. You can then also, well, most often then the theoretical, the conceptual model of your theory after your literature, you can then now compare and contrast the two, and you can put them together, you can overlap them, you can see, for instance, what was the conceptual map looking like based on literature, what does it look like based on your findings, and you can integrate the two then in the end as well. So if in the past few evenings, we've talked about Bloom's taxonomy and working through levels of critical thinking. So the highest level of critical thinking is creativity. And then this result in terms of creativity also takes you to the top of Bloom's taxonomy in terms of critical and abstract thinking, and how it then develops. All right, so I've really spoken quite a lot tonight, and I hope I didn't bore you too much. There's a lot of information, but I really hope that the examples that I gave you maybe made it a bit clearer for you to understand the difference between theoretical framework, and a conceptual framework. And that you can maybe use that to also frame your study and develop your frameworks, or what you then would use it for in your study. So from my side, thank you for your patience in going through very abstract information tonight, and for bearing with the process. But we're now ready to go to our question and answers session. So let's have a look. Just give me a minute or two to get to the Q&As. And we will take the questions from there. Just waiting for it to open up. So, oh my goodness. Either I've explained it so well that you have very few questions, or or I've lost you somewhere completely. So at the moment, there's three questions. But please, if you have any more, you're more than welcome. We have 30 minutes, or just less than 30 minutes to discuss them. So please add if you've got others. But let's look at those that aren't there. Thank you, Prof. In one's research, is it necessary to use both theoretical framework and a conceptual framework? No, you don't need to use both. You can just use a theoretical framework. You don't need to use or do both. So the conceptual framework is something that you develop in your study, and not all studies aims to develop conceptual frameworks. So theoretical framework is mostly prevalent, but not all studies have conceptual frameworks. Does this mean that if I use grounded theory, I would have a conceptual framework instead of a theoretical framework? Most definitely, because the assumption of a grounded theory is that there isn't a theoretical framework at that point in time, and that you are actually developing one through a grounded theory approach. So yes, most definitely. You can end with a conceptual framework after your literature review, and then you can develop a conceptual or theoretical framework at the end of the study. So forward thinking, forward moving. In the case of a mixed method design, is it necessary to develop two conceptual frameworks for both? No. Remember, I said at the point of integration, based on that point of integration, where the two methods are then integrated into one, at that point you could potentially develop a conceptual framework, but no, you wouldn't have a conceptual framework for both. Remember, a conceptual framework is after your literature review, whatever type you are doing. That would be the place to develop a conceptual framework. So that precedes your design. So there's opportunity to use it once after your literature review, and then after the integration of both the quant and qual outcomes of your study. I hope that clarifies it a bit. What happens if your study does not have a theoretical underpinning? What would then go under the theoretical framework section? Nothing. If you're not using a theoretical underpinning, then you don't have the heading theoretical framework. All right, so it is possible. There are studies, but I would clarify it with your supervisor. I'm okay with my students not using a theoretical framework, especially in master's studies, and if they are using a qualitative approach, that's more inductive. But some supervisors insist on a theoretical framework. But if you're a purist, you can argue why you don't have one. So if you don't have one, then don't have the heading. You're not using it in your research. All right, there's the 4 questions. Waiting, we've got a bit of time to discuss. Any other questions that you have? I know that the information can be quite a lot, and you need time to digest it. So that could also be the dynamic why there's fewer questions tonight, and that you simply need time to absorb. Or, as I said, I might have been very clear. Right. Any other questions? Once you are ready, please do publish them now. Let's see, there's an extra question. I'm currently writing my master's dissertation. My personal philosophy about the literature review is this: start from the global to the local. What's your take on this approach? Okay, that is a writing technique. It's not really a philosophy. Philosophy is your belief about something. It is good writing practice, to start from the global and then right to the local. So yes, that's a good writing strategy, and one that we mostly use when we write, especially our background. We start from the global and then we go to the local or the national or the district. So that's a strategy, a writing strategy. But your personal belief system could include, for instance, that I believe people have the ability to have unique realities. That might be a personal belief. And therefore, I choose a certain design because that aligns with my personal beliefs. Okay, so I hope that clarifies in terms of the terminology that we also use. Is there a difference between theoretical grounding and theoretical frameworks? No, it's choice of words. Different people call the same thing differently. So theoretical grounding is your theoretical underpinning or theoretical frame or your theory, and it refers to the same thing. So as I said in the beginning, you'll have different authors that speak about the same thing but call it differently, and then that's very confusing if you're a student. But it refers to the same thing. So what I would suggest is the same with your words that you use for your design. If you follow a author or a specific, like Cresswell speaks about a qualitative design and, for instance, a grounded theory approach. So if I follow Cresswell, then I will use my terminology according to his wording. The same you can ask your supervisors. Sometimes some supervisors or disciplines have as a standard way of calling the theoretical aspect in a certain way. And some call it theoretical perspectives, other calls it theories, other calls it theoretical grounding or framework. So please decide which one you want to use or what's the convention in your discipline, and then use it consistently. Okay, anything else? Any other questions? Otherwise, you're going to get a early evening off. It might also be that it's going towards the end of the week if you're feeling anything like me. Okay, I don't see any new questions coming along. Kind of going, gone. If there's then nothing else, I'm going to close the session, and I wish you all the best with your conceptualization phase of your research, thinking about your paradigms, your theories that you're going to use, and how you're going to operationalize it. And please just remember to keep it alive throughout your project. So then from my side, have an excellent evening, have a good weekend ahead, and keep engaging in your studies. Have a good time. Keep well. Bye-bye.